Something about FSU's defense last season just didn't sit right in the mouths of fans. While they were elite during stretches against admittedly mediocre offenses, they seemed to struggle against better teams, and the advanced analytics bear out these struggles. According to F+, FSU finished the season with the 14th best offense, but only the 35th best defense, which is just a small step above their 37th best finish 2 years ago. So who's to blame for this apparent mediocrity? Most people fell into one of two camps. Either they blamed defensive coordinator Adam Fuller, or they blamed cornerbacks coach Marcus Woodson, and defensive coordinator Adam Fuller. And it's hard to fault those feelings. Against two 6-7 teams, FSU gave up plays like these, which simply put are just clips of FSU corners getting torched in man or match man coverages. When you're looking to get back at the top of the college football pantheon, this is just not really acceptable. That's why the fanbase mostly rejoiced at the replacement of Woodson with Patrick Surtain. If the secondary was the reason for FSU's failures, then replacing the corners coach should fix the issue. But here's the problem. A cursory glance at the stats tell a completely different story. FSU was the 12th best team in the country in terms of yards per pass, which is on the edge of being elite, but they were only the 58th best team in terms of yards per rush. To put it simply, they were much better at limiting the pass than they were at limiting the run. Yet somehow that doesn't feel very convincing. Your gut might be telling you those numbers are inaccurate. They're really not. The problem is that numbers can lie. Let's take a closer look at a play against Clemson where FSU totally shut down the pass. Clemson here is in a tray formation with two receivers and a tight end to one side of the field and a single receiver to the other. FSU, like most modern college defenses, runs split field coverages, meaning that each side of the ball runs their own independent coverage. In this case, FSU is most likely playing what Saban would call cougar to the bottom of the screen. Effectively, this is a type of cover 2 man, the tip-off being the safety bailing to the deep half of the field, where these two corners could potentially switch off their receivers. The giveaway here being the nickel who keeps his body pointed outside, so he's ready to rob any sort of inside route by the outside receiver. To the top of the screen, they're running what I believe to be called Connie. This is a coverage check for tight single-side receivers. Basically, since he's close to the running back, there's a good chance that he's releasing inside, and the back is replacing him to the outside. Connie allows the corner to pass off those inside release and look for the running back to replace him on the wheel. FSU then plays this where the safety comes down hard off the roof on any sort of inside release by this outside receiver to help the linebacker who's been tasked with covering a speedy receiver running across the field. Okay, that's a lot to swallow, but here's the upshot. FSU is playing what's called man-match concepts. That means they're essentially playing man coverage with two deep safeties. They just aren't necessarily declaring which man they're covering until they're downfield. Clemson knows this and runs what's probably the best man beater in the game, a play called mesh that basically uses crossers to set a natural pick and spring a receiver open. But because of the switching nature of the defense, they're able to pretty much swallow up any options Clemson has. Here's another one. Clemson's in tray again, and they motion to a stack. FSU is playing cougar coverage again, where basically this outside corner will take the first outer up, and the inside corner will take the first inside. Basically, they're forming a triangle over these two receivers. FSU is playing what's called cone coverage to the top, which is basically just a match cover 4. Essentially, this is the same look from both teams, and FSU is again able to suffocate Clemson's passing game. The only problem is, now that everybody's in coverage, there's no one to stop the scramble. In order to play these coverages, FSU needs two deep safeties. Unfortunately, that extra safety means there's one less person to stop the run, which I like to call having a light box. You're essentially just asking the safety, who we just saw be instrumental in coverage, also be able to recognize the run at a moment's notice and fill this gap to stop the run. And against good teams, that's easier said than done. You're selling out to shut down the pass and essentially hoping that one of your defensive linemen can cover two gaps at once. But the thing is, this is probably the right move. Like I showed in my last video, they're an elite company in the amount of times they lived in a light box. And that's because there's a simple truth in football that coaches, fans, and analysts have been pushing back against for decades. Throwing the ball is simply more effective than running it. FSU's coverage was borderline elite last year, but they effectively played with an extra man back there. So what happens when you control for that factor? and all plays ran last season between all teams against 11 personnel with 6 or less players in the box, i.e. a light box. FSU's yards per pass ranking dropped from 12th to a much more pedestrian 58th. So basically, FSU was the 58th best team in pass coverage when all teams were on equal footing. But the big question is if this secondary will improve next year. So far this spring, they bolstered the room with Virginia transfer Fentrell Cypress, and the other players seem to be taking well to the coaching change. But this group still has a lot to prove. So going into the spring game, the big question remains, is this group going to remain a liability on this defense? Are they going to help FSU take the next step forward? Perfect. Thanks for watching. Let me know if there's any concepts you want me to cover in the offseason. We'll have tons of coverage after the spring game, so make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Thanks.